Welcome to Spark in the Spiral, a podcast where ADHD meets creativity and we have empowering conversations that celebrate neurodivergence. Whether you're chasing your dreams, building a career, or just trying to survive the dopamine drought, this is your space to laugh, learn, and find the spark in your own spiral. I'm Sonali, your host, and this is episode 1. ADHD is not the problem, it's actually your superpower. You just have to learn how to use it. Today, we're going to be talking about how you see ADHD as a problem, how to shift that mindset. And once you shift that mindset towards it, what are the action steps that you do to make it work in your own advantage and see life through different lenses? So let's dive into it. And let me start with this, with a thought, something for you to think about. Have you ever thought that your brain is really working against you? It's not giving you any advantages. You're thinking there is a problem with you or something is wrong with you. But what if I told you that your brain is not against you? Your ADHD is not the problem. It's actually your secret weapon. I used to think that my brain was broken. As a kid, I would start a million projects. You could actually name it. Painting, writing, extracurriculars, out of school, not out of school, at home, a new skill, only to literally start it and leave it unfinished. Once I thought that I've accomplished something or I did something, or I would get bored about it. And then I would be like, okay, what's the next shiny idea? What's next? What's next? What's next? And if there's nothing next, I would be like, okay, let's make it work. Let's find something that in my head was like, what's next? And in school, I would always get called smart but distracted, smart but zoned out, smart but A, B, C, D, E, F, G, consistently on and on and on. And I was like, what's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? Like, why do they always have to have a but in my report card? And don't even get me started with my first traditional jobs where I had to be sitting in one place doing the same repetitive task over and over and over. Just like that. I realized where it actually came from, and I realized okay, this is the same exact thing that's happening when I was in high school, but in a different scenario. So I was like, am I doing something wrong? Is something wrong with me? But here's the thing. Once I stopped trying to fight the way that my brain actually works, instead working with it, adapting to it, making small changes of what feels good, while yes, making changes, but not changing your essence, your beliefs, and the way that you are actually wired and born to do things, everything changed. When I started looking at it as oh, is there something wrong with me or is there a problem? Everything changed. I remember that I built my jewelry brand, ran pop-up events, started at a very, very young age on an entry-level marketing job, and I progressed into 5+ levels in a very short period of time up to upper-level management, campaign management. Obviously, it was because of my hard work, my work ethic, and whatnot, but there was a lot of people that really couldn't do it. And I thought okay, I can, at the beginning, I thought okay, how can I do it? Because I have this block, that I have ADHD, that I have this, that I have that. And I even learned a fourth language. And honestly, even this podcast was something for me because yes, it is part of it. And all because I harnessed how to be able to handle ADHD instead of looking at it as a problem. Yes, you could work hard, you could have a work ethic, you could have discipline, you have talents and skill, but this was way more internal than that. And I know that if you're listening to this, you can relate with this. So if you've ever felt overwhelmed, scattered, all over the place, or you can't really just stick to one specific thing and you're doing a bunch of things at the same time, stick with me because I promise you that ADHD is not your weakness. It's actually your greatest strength. Let's first talk about how ADHD minds struggle with focus and productivity. Now, that doesn't mean that focusing is the struggle. And that's a misconception that a lot of us think, including myself. So if you ever sat down thinking about so many different things and suddenly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 tabs pop up into researching something so unrelated with what you actually have to do or what your focus actually has to be. Or maybe you have an amazing idea, something that happened before, or something that happened today. It doesn't really matter when, but it really has nothing to do. even though it really does make sense. Somehow it just doesn't really pass in that overthinking, brainstorming, thinking about it stage. That was me. And sometimes that is still me with the knowledge of knowing how to be able to do it now. So let me tell you this. ADHD brains crave, when I say crave, I mean craves excitement, craves novelty, craves for like the next step of what is triggering to them, what is encouraging, exciting to them. That's why we tend to jump from one idea to another, but it's also why we struggle through things that are repetitive and boring and mundane. Yes, I know the belief of like habit takes doing the same thing over and over again and consistency and all of that. I am not even talking about this. This is a whole different concept that is about character and behavior that leads towards that. And we don't have a lack of focus. And I would always think like, oh my God, I have a lack of focus. Like I can't focus. It's because we have way too much focus, but it's scattered. Fast forward to when I was running my jewelry business, I noticed a very similar thing than the previous experience that I mentioned. I would spend so many hours designing new collections, focusing on the creative direction, the visual aspect, on the e-commerce and the social media, on the ads and the branding, hours and hours and hours. And we're talking about like when I was the only person. That's when I didn't even have employees, interns or whatnot. So I was like the head of it. I had to do it all. And I knew that I had to do other stuff like the bookkeeping, the inventory, the shipping side of things, all the other stuff. But somehow the way that my brain was processed, I was getting excited and focusing so much on one thing, on that specific item or aspect that I mentioned before, that I was unconsciously avoiding the boring and what was mundane, like what I mentioned, the bookkeeping and all that kind of stuff. Does that sound familiar? And that's when I realized, even though I would get it done, it took so much for me to actually get it done in a timely manner and whatnot. And what was not in a deadline, what was not due, I would get it done right away. And that's when I realized that the problem is not like we're not focused, is that we need a system or a structure that works with our natural flow instead of focusing with the structures already designed for neurotypical brains, not necessarily neurodivergent brains like ours. And this leads to an example that I have from a past experience, one of the most peak and most important experience as a grown-up, of my previous career, previous job, you could name it, on a e-commerce jewelry related marketing industry. And I remember I was really doing very well. It was adding a lot of value to my own business, to my goals, using those transferable skills to what I actually wanted to do. And in fact, I was progressing and growing and doing so amazing. I was so full and so happy where I was actually working while also achieving my own dreams, my own business at the time. And I remember one time towards the end, when I say towards the end, towards like when I was like in the high, one of the highest levels that I could actually be as a creative director and digital marketer, focusing on e-commerce and in the fashion industry as well. I was working very side by side with a head and someone that I really admire, someone that I really wanted to work with, and we got along very well. We had a business relationship, and it became to a point that I was doing things right, discounting the mistakes that I made. And even when I did things right, I would get comments like, "Are you sure that you're doing it right?" They were literally like repeated to me like if I was a baby over and over and over. Baby steps. This is what you have to do. This is what you have to do. This is what you have to do again, over and over again. And I was like, why? I've been here for years. Why are they now doing this? One time I brought it up. I was like, hey, I know when I make mistakes, obviously, because I want to be better, because you think that you could encourage me and you want me to be better, I take constructive criticism and I acknowledge it, I own it, and then work on it to make it better. And if I don't have the answer, I will do whatever it takes to either ask for questions or ask for help. But in this case, I've known and I've not been pointing out any mistakes or anything like that. So I feel like there is some sort of miscommunication or some sort of doubt of like, even when I do the right thing and even when people give me compliments or I said, oh my God, I did this, or these she exceeded expectations and whatnot, I would get comments of like, no, you didn't. You have like a weird brain. Like, I just wanted to explain you because I know you're special. And I was like, okay, I'll take that, not as a negative. And then I remember this phrase, also a phrase that I heard in childhood, in college, and in high school, one time in each. And they were like, but you're wired differently, you know? And I always used to see that phrase as a problem, like, oh my God, someone's telling me you're wired differently. That's a problem. That's a problem if you see it as a problem. But being different, being neurodivergent, being authentic, having a different structure, having a different way that you process things doesn't mean that you're a failure, doesn't mean that you're going to get the bad results. You can even exceed expectations, which I did. But it was just the mindset. I was like, you know what? Let me stop and think and understand. Change my mindset. Yes, I didn't say that, but yes, I am wired differently. That is not a negative. That is not something that I saw as a negative anymore. In fact, that was something to be very proud of. Because the way I saw it after is, yes, I am wired differently. That's why I see things that a lot of people don't see. That's why I do things the way that a lot of people don't do and then still get the same results or exceed expectations. It's just about understanding and shifting that mindset to a point that I'm even thinking of having that tattoo. I've been thinking about having that tattoo that says wired differently for a very long time. If my parents are seeing this podcast, they hate that I have tattoos because I have a million of them. This is going to be the last one, hopefully. But yeah, it's something that now I embrace, that I loved about myself and that I owned, that I'm literally going to get a tattoo about it. That's called the mindset shift. The way that you look at it and the way that you act towards it and the way that your actions reflect towards it and the way that you make it work in your advantage by allowing you to do things in a better way once you have the positive mindset. Because once you have that negative mindset that it's a problem, the actions that you put and the things that you try to do is just not going to work for you. That was also the start of me breaking from the overwhelm of it all. Like, chaos is a sign of creativity a lot of times. And I'm going to share with you a reframe that really changed my life. A lot of you might have heard the actual quote. I don't really remember on top of my head, but I can tell you the reframe of that actual quote and how that quote did it for me and still does it and is a big reason of why I'm literally here talking to you in this podcast. And that reframe was, feeling overwhelmed is not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you are creating. Let it sink again. Feeling overwhelmed is not a sign that you are failing. It's a sign that you're creating. And I know it sounds as easy as that, but think about it. A lot of people of neurotypical minds, everyone else, they might not face or have the same issues that we have when it comes to like processing things and like the way our brain works, but creating is not something everyone does. It sounds very easy, but it requires authenticity. Yes, hard work, talent, work ethic, but it requires that one of a kind way that you see things, that you see yourself and how you embrace your essence and your character, no matter what issues you have and no matter how people see that your brain works. And it's not something that everyone does. So if you're actually creating, it doesn't matter what level, you should actually be proud of yourself and know that not everyone does it. And that's something that you should actually own. And once I understood that and once I owned it, I realized that the ADHD brain process ideas very, very different. It's like fireworks. You see fireworks, it sparks in a bunch of places, in a bunch of directions, a bunch of them going all at once. It's easy to get lost in all of it. You have the option to like want to shut it all or like be overwhelmed by it or just simply enjoy it all. But the ADHD brain selects which ones to enjoy, which ones to choose, which ones to keep on and which ones to keep off. And then I learned how to channel those things. And going back to that story, Here was how. The first and most important thing was understanding how to work with or cope with the flexible but accountable systems. Now, when I say flexibles and accountable systems, is that instead of following that stereotypical rigid schedules, now I'm not saying that your flexible schedule or flexible accountable system is not going to be rigid or is going to be like you not doing anything and wandering around. No, it's how you make it work in a way that it doesn't feel so tight on you. So, for example, I used time blocking. I gave myself specific windows for creative work, for working out, for personal time, for sleeping, for admin tasks, for business, for this job, for that job, for absolutely everything, even the most minimum thing like eating, cleaning. And this kept me and still keeps me focused without feeling restricted. But then I get to get more results and better results with consistency without having that pressure in my mind, like, oh my God, I have to be like everyone else. The second one was breaking tasks into micro steps. I know a lot of times we talk about like setting small goals, midterm goals, long-term goals, breaking it into mini steps, whether it's a to-do list, whether it's an app. What I'm talking about is it really has to do with a lot of it, but something that's tailored to you. So personally, I used apps and I also used notepads. A lot of people use it differently. There's a lot of apps these days. You could actually name it, but I used the specific app that was called Magic To Do. I know it's very similar to a very popular app that's called Sunsama. It basically helps you break not just like short-term, mid-term, long-term goals, but how to have bit-sized actions. Because a lot of times when you have short-term, mid-term, long-term goals, the action part of it, you still have to figure it out after the steps. But this one breaks it into subs and subs and subs. And you get a lot more done than just like thinking about what's like the small, mid, and long term. I'm gonna give you an example. So let's say when it came to jewelry, instead of setting as a goal, I have to launch a new collection for spring 2025. What I did and what that app made help me do was to have tiny, manageable, realistic, but very doable and action related steps like, and it would narrow it down. I would not put like 10 of them. I would put like 3 to 5 of them. Choose 3 designs today. Focus on A, B, C, D, E, F, G kinds of ads that would trigger this. Target this kind of post with this kind of specific design, with this kind of influencer at this kind of time to do this, to launch the new collection. It was very action based. It was also very, very, very baby steps. And those baby steps, because instead of it being 10, it was 3 to 5, it still was enough chunk, but actually made me do more. Because when we see like, oh my God, I have like 10 things that I have to do, we don't accomplish it. But when we see that we have 3 specific things or 4 specific things and it's descriptive, we still do more than that or complete all of it. And that's one of the biggest things that helped me. I'm just using an example of the app and how it helped me in like the jewelry aspect of it, but it's helped me in absolutely everything. I can go on and on and on about it. And a lot of people work with planners, with to-do lists, with reminders, everything. But this specific app and this specific strategy helped me tailor it without even having to use the app until today's day. Like I started using at the beginning, but when I don't, it's wired my brain into like, okay, that's the way that I think now. When I make decisions, when I say something, when I want something, when I do something, just like doing this podcast. The next point was body doubling. And I feel like that's one of the most important things. And that's something that a lot of people don't talk about or don't think that is important. I didn't think so either at all until a few years ago. And I came into a conclusion that body doubling is so important because it's one of those things like, let's say you have to do something really boring to you, career related, progress related, creative industry related, overall. Something really boring that you really don't want to do, but you actually have to get it done, but it's going to take you longer if you don't find a way to make that work. And if it's something, and if you're in a creative industry, at least for me, I'm in a creative entrepreneurship industry, fashion, advertising, an artistic industry, even sales incorporated with the ability to have trend forecasting and freedom to have your own voice and style and creative aspect to it. Because I feel like creativity is not just the title of like, oh, I'm creative. It is a lifestyle. Believe it or not. Most people, even though they don't have that in their title, you are creative. I would talk to a friend. If I was able to actually do it while I was being hands-on on something, I would listen to a podcast, share something with someone. I would have a virtual co-working session, something that would keep me engaged to either boost it during it or after it. A lot of times I did it before it and during it if I had the opportunity, but at least before, during, or after. One of it is enough to be able to overcome that body doubling. This also helps because the key is not forcing yourself into a system that doesn't work for you or doesn't fit you, but finding one that supports your creativity while making sure that you are on track with what you actually have to do, what you want to do, what you aim to do. This also leads to why, with our neurodivergent minds, why traditional productivity fails ADHD minds. Have you ever started a perfect morning routine, convinced that this time this will be different, that finally you're going to get your structure, control of your life, you're going to get it done, only to wake up one day and feeling overwhelmed or saturated, out of sync, like you've already failed. You're not even starting your day. You're not even like starting anything. You feel suffocated and suddenly like you start spiraling like self-doubt, wondering if like why something so simple feels so impossible to stick with. Yes, we do it 1,000%, but we know how hard it is as well. And even if it's not applicable to the majority, it's not laziness. And if you're hearing this, you and I know it's not laziness. That's like the opposite of what it is. And when it comes to that, most productivity advice of society will be, especially for neurotypical brains, will be just be disciplined, just get it done, work so hard and like then be successful afterwards, or like work hard now, be successful, and then have the freedom afterwards, grind, just make a to-do list and stick with it. It's as simple as it sounds. Yeah, that doesn't work with us. We could actually be consistent, exceed, go above and beyond, do a lot more, but that's not the process. That's not tailored to us. It's just the way it is. And here is why. Because ADHD brains, like I mentioned before in an example of what they crave, they are passion driven. We work best when we're excited, not where we find ourselves like pressured and slaves to do something specific because we have to do it, but not understanding why we're doing it or how we're doing it. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to get things done. That doesn't mean that we're going to be lazy, that we're not going to just not do things and not be consistent and not go above and beyond just because it's something that's not like cool or interesting to us. No, that's not what I mean. It's just the process that it would take us to actually do it. And then rigid schedules kill creativity. If you tell me I have to do something at a certain time, a certain day, a certain minute, boom, 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 my brain will be will literally resist. Again, that doesn't mean I'm not going to do it. But instead, we work with energy-based waves. If you have ADHD, I know you know this term. And I ask myself, what feels more exciting, more amazing, more intriguing to start right now? There's where I start. Because when I started in that process, I realized that it eventually leads into me looking at the boring stuff or not so cool stuff with the same mindset as with what I started with. And most neurotypical minds will start with like the opposite. So it's just a small shift in process. Again, towards the next part. We need movement, not stillness. That doesn't mean that we have to be working out 24/7. I mean, I do work out, but I haven't really worked out recently. But when I say movement, I don't just mean working out, going on a hike or stuff like that. Like if you have a pet, go on a break, on a walk. If you work a 9 to 5 corporate job or in an actual place, whatever minutes that you have, just move around if you can. I'm not saying you have to take a 30-minute necessarily or a 1 hour lunch break all the time, but just movements, because It's just like the quote that says, like, a lot of people think better when they're driving, when they're in the highway, when they are showering. That's kind of like what I mean with movement breaks instead of bed rotting. And it helps brainstorming for us more than it would help any neurotypical mind. And here's a challenge for you. Next time you feel stuck, next time that you feel overwhelmed and that you can't push through and you have to do this and you have to do that, instead, follow your passion for a bit first and see where that leads you. You might be surprised of how much you're going to actually get done when you start with a different way instead of what most people would start with, what is more exciting to you. And also working with your brain down against it. Because victimizing things and feeling pity about it will just give you excuses of why you can't do it. Now, why you actually can do it. So, to wrap this up, what we're really talking about here is reframing your view through the way that you see ADHD, because the chaos is not here to hold you back. It really isn't. It's here to light the way for you. And when you stop seeing ADHD as a flaw and start embracing it as a different operating system, everything will change. Again, you're not broken. You're just wired differently. If this resonates with you, don't forget to share, subscribe, follow, and like. And I'm really happy that you're actually here, and I can't wait to have you in the next episode.